kids of all ages are welcome. So good to have you guys here with us today. How's everybody doing? You doing well? Yeah? Well, it is so good to have you here. We are continuing our Exodus series, and today is a very special day. As you know, if you were here last week, I have been working hard on a time machine. That's right. I made it, and I got it to work. So we're going to have a very special guest with us in just a moment. His name is, anybody remember what his name is? The 80-year-old shepherd that God chose to save his people? It was Moses. And so Moses is going to go back from time, and he's going to come and speak to you in just a few minutes. Do you guys want to meet him? All right, I need a couple volunteers. Who's a good reader? Who's a good reader? All right. All right. Andrew? All right. So there's your questions. Now again, he's going to be all sort of, taken aback by this whole future thing, okay? All right, so you're number one, right? All right, so you guys want to meet him? All right, can we give it a countdown? 3, 2, 1. Hey, hello, sir, come down this way. Come over here. Come on down. Be careful. You're Moses, right? My name is Ben. You're Moses, right?
Yes, that is my name, but where am I? Last thing I remember, I was walking with my brother Aaron to go see Pharaoh, and suddenly I'm here.
Well, have a seat. My bad, Moses. I brought you here. I just wanted the kids to be able to meet the man who God chose to lead his people out of slavery. And so I was wondering, can we ask you a few questions? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I have a few minutes.
Very good, Wait, okay, go ahead. Read that. Put the microphone right to your face.
Moses, my name is Natalie. My question for you is, are you worried that Pharaoh is going to throw you in jail or hurt you?
Throw me in jail or hurt me? Absolutely. Pharaoh is not a very nice guy, and he's the most powerful man in the known world. But I know God will protect.
Very good, very good. Second question. Go ahead. Pass. Here, use the mic so everybody can hear you.
Moses, my name is Andrew, and my question is for you. Do you think you will have the courage to speak clearly before the Pharaoh?
Well, I've never been the most eloquent in speech, which is why God is having my brother Aaron to do the talking. But God has promised to put the words in our mouths. So when I say, let my people go, it will be God speaking through me.
Oh, excellent, excellent. We got one more question here.
Hi Moses, my name is Ben, and my question is for you. What is your biggest fear as you go to confront Pharaoh?
That's a good question. My biggest fear is that Pharaoh won't believe that it was God who sent me. But I know God will look out for me, and when I say to free the Israelite people, he'll be with me all the way.
Very good. So he'll be with you always. He promised that, didn't he? Very good. Well, thank you for allowing us to ask you some questions.
By the way, God gave me the ability to turn this here staff into a deadly king cobra steak. You guys want to see it?
No, please. We've already talked with the kids. We've got some people with fear of snakes. But let's everybody give Moses a round of applause, and thank you so much for being here. All right, you have a good time with Pharaoh, okay? All right. Well, it was so good that you guys were able to ask him some questions. And so did you see that he was kind of scared and kind of worried that he was going to go before Pharaoh? But we know that God promised that he was always going to be with Moses. And so what we're going to see today is how do we respond with sometimes when we're in situations and it doesn't turn out the way that we had hoped. How do we respond? Do we remember to God's promises? Or do we get angry and upset? So good job. Thank you for asking him some questions. Well done. You guys can keep those. Awesome. If you attend preschool through first grade, you can head to Rest Stop with your parents' permission. As the kids are getting situated, please open up your Bibles to the book of Exodus. We're going to be in chapter 5 today. Good job listening, guys. So as I try to illustrate to the kids, today's passage is incredibly important to the story of Exodus. For the last few weeks, we've been working with this idea that this is no ordinary book, that this is a historical account of what actually happened for God's people. And so we were able to talk about how the Israelites had become slaves for hundreds of years, and now the time had come where God would choose a deliverer. And of all people in all the world, he chose an 80-year-old shepherd. He looked really good for 80, didn't he? But regardless, as we're going to see in today's passage, that Moses has already, along with his brother Aaron, traveled from Midian to Egypt, and he's met with the Israelite leaders, and he's told them what the Lord has confirmed to him. And so if you got your Bibles open, I wanted to point out the previous verse, in verse that would be 31. Surprisingly, the Israelites believed what Moses had said. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. And so the people of God were realizing that, yes, they were in a terrible situation, living the life of slaves. But now God's messenger, God's deliverer has come to proclaim that deliverance is almost here. It's on its way. And their response is worship, and they're eager to see how God was going to rescue them. But keep in mind that Moses was feeling incredibly inadequate. Not only did he send his brother along, but Moses had to remember that God was always going to be with him. And so keep that in mind as we take a look at today's passage, starting with verse 1. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the desert." Pharaoh said, "Well, who is this Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." And then they said, "Well, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword." But the king of Egypt said, "Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Now get back to work." Pharaoh said, "Look at the people in the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working." That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and the foremen in charge of the people: "You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. This is why they're crying out, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.' Make the work harder for the men, so that they keep working and pay no attention to the lies." But then the slave drivers and the foremen went out and said to the people, "This is what the Pharaoh says. I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it. But your work will not be reduced at all." So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, "Complete your work required for you each day, just as if you had the straw." The Israelite foremen appointed by Moses' slave drivers were beaten. And they were asked, "Well, why didn't you meet your quota of bricks yesterday or today as before?" Then the Israelite foreman went up and appealed to Pharaoh, saying, "Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet they were told, 'Make bricks.' Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is with your people." The Pharaoh said, "Lazy. That's what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.' Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce the full quota of bricks." The Israelite foremen realized that they were in trouble when they were told, "You are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you each day." When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them, and they said, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh, and his officials have put a sword in their hand to kill us." So as you saw in our interview with Moses, he was kind of nervous going to speak to Pharaoh. Remember, Pharaoh is the most powerful person in the entire ancient world, and in the Egyptian culture, he was worshipped as a living god. And so if you've ever had to make a big speech, maybe in school, maybe a business presentation, maybe a toast at a wedding. You know that feeling where you're going to talk to someone really important, or before a group of people, where your heart starts beating, and your palms get kind of clammy, and your heart rate goes up, and you feel like your heart's going to come right out of your chest because you're so nervous. Imagine for Moses, 80 years old, going with his brother to meet with the most powerful man in the entire world, to demand something that, again, for all intents and purposes, there's no way Pharaoh's going to comply. And so it's really a miracle that they were able to get to see to Pharaoh in the first place. Imagine it. You know, my brother worked for the president for a time, and he worked at the White House. And he said from time to time, people just kind of stroll up to the White House and say, I'm here to see the president. And my brother would go, do you have an appointment? They'd be like, no, he's my president, I just want to talk to him. And just try to get in to see the president. Of course, the Secret Service agents would not let him in, because he was the most powerful person in the world. And for Moses and Aaron, we're not sure exactly how the Lord worked it out. We're able to go before this Pharaoh and demand something. Notice how they say, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Basically, they walk in and say, hey, look, Pharaoh, this is not me talking here. This is what our God, his sacred name is Yahweh, has said. Let my people go. And of course, all different images of Charlton Heston and all those different movies come flooding in when we hear that. But you have to understand that what gave Moses the courage to step forward was knowing he wasn't there by himself. He was standing right next to the presence of God in such a way that when he spoke, it wasn't him. It was the Lord, declaring, let my people go so that they may hold a festival, so that they may worship me in the desert. How do you think Pharaoh responded? We see that. Who is this Yahweh? In Egyptian culture, they had all sorts of gods. They had a god for food, and a god for fertility, and a god for building, and a god for war. And Pharaoh says, hey, who is this Yahweh character? I've never heard of him before. Maybe he looked over to his advisors. Have you ever heard of this Yahweh character? No, I haven't heard of him. Why should I then obey you? No, I will not let Israel go. And you can imagine how they're feeling right now. Moses and Aaron, again, even more nervous, because again, with a word, Pharaoh could have executed Moses and Aaron on the spot. And so they clarify, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let them take a three-day journey to the desert, again, to offer sacrifices to worship. And then, like many cultures in the ancient world, you were told to obey God, because if you didn't, bad things would happen. And so Moses and Aaron point out that if we don't obey our God, maybe he's going to get angry and send some plagues, which of course he's going to. Or he's going to send a foreign army to come by the sword and take you out, which he does later on. And look at how he responds. I think I have a slide here. Go ahead. But when the king of Egypt said, why on earth, Moses and Aaron, I like how the Message paraphrase it, would you suggest that the people be given a holiday? Back to work, and he's yelling at them, and you can imagine how upset he is. Points out that there's great numbers of people there. There's not another slide, is there? Oh, Pharaoh went on, look, I've got all these people bumming around. I don't think they were bumming around, but I think that's a good idea. Bumming around, and now you want me to reward them with time off. Because remember how we started the passage. They were eager, they were excited for the deliverance that comes, so maybe they actually had stopped working, eager to say, well, is this going to work? Is he going to let us go? Are we going to be able to go for 3 days? Now, it shouldn't be surprising for Moses, because you remember back in chapter 3, God said, look, remember, this is God giving Moses the plan, but I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand, and I will strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. And after that, he will let you go. And so it shouldn't be a huge surprise to Moses that Pharaoh has said absolutely not. But still, to be sent out when all of these millions of people, possibly, probably 1 million people, are waiting for what happens. And he says, no, forget about it. So to see the hardness of his heart, because again, Moses has to understand that it's not just like he's going to step in and everything's going to be just great. right? Sometimes we do that, right? We go to a business meeting or we go to a meeting with a person and we think, oh, well, if we lay it all out, they'll just believe us. And then you walk away like, why didn't that work? Moses already knew that Pharaoh's heart was so hardened that it's going to take the mighty hand of God to change his heart. And so to show how absolutely despicable this man was, the same day Pharaoh gave this order, you are no longer supply the people with straw. Can we see that picture of the brick set? So what we know is when the Hebrew people would make bricks, they'd go to the Nile River and they'd collect mud. And if you've ever played with mud as a kid, or maybe when you're an adult and you like to make mud pies, even when you're an adult. If you ever played with mud, you know it's heavy, right? And so they had to transport it from the Nile to their construction site to make these bricks. But of course they didn't have rebar like we have today with concrete. So what they would do is they would use straw interlaced with the mud to form the bricks. And the straw helped to give it strength. It helped to give it some stability so that it wasn't just, plopping all over the place. And so you see there an example of bricks made with straw. What a terrible thing for the Pharaoh to say, no longer are we going to provide you with straw right next to the building site, because you got to bring your own mud. Now, you have to go out to the countryside where the straw is grown, collect it and use it. It would be the equivalent to having your foreman, if you worked construction. I think I have a picture of that. Is that towards that? Is that in there? There it is. Now, if you didn't know, our wonderful village pharmacy here in town is doing an addition. And if you've been driving by, you know the first thing that they did was they poured a strong foundation. And if you look at the foundation, there you see the equivalent, the ancient equivalent, right, to straw. We have that rebar. Imagine if you had a boss that said to you, look, you need to pour that foundation at the village pharmacy, but you know what, I don't have time to bring you rebar and rewire, but you still need to find some. And you were working on the job site like, what do? If I build this foundation without any reinforcement, it's just going to crumble. So what would you do? You'd go house to house and say, do you have any metal I could use, like scrap metal? Oh, maybe that old aerial antenna, maybe I could use that. And they would have to scrounge around to get the job done. And so you can imagine the plight of the Hebrew people, that they would now have to go out and find the straw, they'd have to collect the mud, and so they weren't able to meet their quota. Verse 14, the Israelite foremen appointed by Pharaoh's slaves were beaten. And they were asked, why didn't you make your quota of bricks? And so how would you respond? If your boss is mean to you, what do? If your parents are being unfair, what do? You make an appeal. You go to them and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't fair. And the text says that literally, the Israelite foremen walked up and they cried out to Pharaoh, pleading with him, why have you treated your servants this way? We are given no straw, yet we were told to make bricks. Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is not our own. And do you think Pharaoh was nice about it? He looked right at the people and said, you're lazy. Lazy Lawrence. Right there in front of me. Now get back to work. And did you see what he was saying? This is why he keeps saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. He really believed that they had enough free time when they were making bricks that they would think about worshiping the Lord. And so he thought, well, if I work them to the bone where they have to get the mud from the Nile and the straw, they literally won't have enough time to think about this whole let's go worship Yahweh stuff. And when the Israelites realized that they were in trouble, how do you respond? How do you respond when you got disappointments? How do you respond when something doesn't go your way? Do you get angry? Do you get in someone's face and, oh yeah, I'm about to tell you what's going on? What do? Right? Is it turned into a Jerry Springer show? No. But look what the Israelites did. They found Moses and Aaron, who was sitting outside of the throne room. And look what they said. They didn't say, Pharaoh is such a terrible person. Pharaoh is being so mean. Who do they blame? They look at Moses and Aaron, they say, may the Lord look upon you and judge you. In other words, they cursed out Moses and Aaron. For you have made us a stench to Pharaoh, and his officials have put a sword in their hand to kill us. In other words, Moses and Aaron, may the Lord judge you. Because this is your fault. You told us God said to go worship him, and now we are suffering. They pointed the finger and they chewed him out. So instead of blaming the Pharaoh, they blamed Moses and Aaron. And so this is just a great illustration of what Moses and Aaron are going to have to deal with time and time again. And when things don't go their way, the Israelites often put the blame on the wrong person. And so as we think back to what we saw with Moses, if we could go to the next slide, please. We see that the enthusiasm of worshipers in the preceding chapter turns sour in this one when Pharaoh refuses to cooperate. The point is clear that when the people of God attempt to devote their full service and allegiance to God, they encounter opposition from the world. And so rather than finding instant blessing and peace, they find conflict. And this is the theme that will continue through the plague narratives. But what makes chapter 5 especially interesting is how the people reacted to that opposition. They didn't blame Pharaoh, they blamed Moses and Aaron. So here's the question for us. As you leave today, and as you think about this passage, and you remember what we talked about, ask yourself, how do we react when we are forced to wait for God's promises to be fulfilled? Do you yell at somebody? Do you treat others around you poorly because you're angry and you're disappointed? Think back to the children's message interview. Remember the last thing that Moses said. He said, my biggest fear is that Pharaoh won't believe that it is God who sent me to free the Israelite people. But I have to remember that God said he would always be with me. Always. And so as you think about all the different disappointments that you have in your life, losing loved ones, things not going your way at work, things not going your way at school, we have a choice to make. Do we yell at the people around us who are trying to encourage us and help us? Do we yell at God? Or do we instead remember God's promises, knowing that salvation is not only here through Jesus Christ, but it's not yet been fulfilled. And the Lord is still working out his plan. And sometimes we get so impatient, we're like, God, I just wish you would act. I just wish you'd do what you said you were going to do. And we get so impatient that we get angry and we get frustrated and we react poorly. But what I want you to see is that no matter what happens in this life, no matter what disappointments and failures that we encounter, we have to remember that God will always be with you. Always. No matter what. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this passage. And Lord, we know that so often we're just disappointed. And we know that sometimes things don't go our way. And as we saw displayed in today's passage, God's people thought that deliverance was at hand. And it is. But they need to wait for you to complete your perfect plan of redemption. And so, Lord, help us to be patient. Help us to wait. And help us to react well when things don't go our way. And help us to remember that you will always be there.